Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to another YPO Presents. I'm Debby Carreau, YPO member and CEO and founder of Inspired HR. Today, I'm thrilled to be speaking with Robert Glazer, founder and CEO of Acceleration Partners, a global marketing agency and recipient of numerous industry and company culture awards, including one of my favorite, Glassdoor's Employee Choice Award, 2 years in a row. He's the author of the inspirational newsletter that we're going to talk about today, Friday Forward, and the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, and international bestseller author of 4 books, Elevate, Friday Forward, How to Make Virtual Teams Work, and Performance Partnerships. He's a sought-after speaker by companies and organizations around the world and is the host of the Elevate podcast. Welcome, Robert. Thanks for coming today.
Thanks, Debbie. Thanks for you're up early to do this, so
So living on the West Coast, it's
you got the short stick of the time zones.
Yeah, this is late in relative terms. So before we get started, just a couple of housekeeping things. I'd like to remind you all watching live to ask our guests questions by posting them in the comment section. And if you're not following us already, please do so, and you can receive a notification when our next podcast begins. So let's get right into it, Robert. The first question I have for you is about your book, Friday Forward. It's a book that's supposed to be 52 weeks of inspiration. I read it all in one day. I thought it was fantastic. How did Friday Forwards become a thing? Can you tell us the story?
Yeah, it was sort of an accident. So I had gone actually through, this was years ago when I was in Entrepreneurs Organization. I had gone through, they have a global leadership academy. And it was a pretty intensive leadership program. And one of the focuses of that was really on improving your morning routine. So getting up a little earlier, reading something positive, writing, thinking. I came back. I really liked that routine. I didn't love the sort of reading positive stuff. They gave us some of these quote books. It was a little of the sort of, rainbow and unicorny stuff. It just wasn't my cup of tea. And
a little cheesy.
Yeah, a little cheesy. And so, but I had some of these stories and quotes and things that I had saved in a folder. And so I decided to sort of maybe combine that writing and reading. And I decided one Friday morning to send a note to my team. And it just started. It was called Friday Inspiration. And they were just either stories or something about improvement or getting better. It wasn't about our business at all. I sent them for a couple months. I didn't think anyone was reading them. I was enjoying writing them, so I kept doing it. It was a good habit. But then I did start to hear back from people, and they'd say, I really love this, or you shared that story about goal setting, and I went and signed up for my first 5K. Also, I sent this to my husband's company, and he shared it, or I shared this with my sister, and she shared it with her family. So it was clear it was sort of getting outside the company. Soon after, I was actually at an event with a few other CEOs. We were talking about best practices. And I said, look, I've started writing this note to my team. I like it. It's a good exercise for me. And, the feedback's been really good. And they said, oh, well, send it to us, 4 or 5 of them. So I sent it to them, and one started his own, I think has done it to this day. And the other 4 or 5 said, like good entrepreneurs said, this is great. We'll just forward this to our teams. And still, I could tell it was going outside the company more. People were asking me where the old ones were. So I basically had to move it from a BCC to kind of an email list, but I made it look like the same text email. I had to manage it. And I was like, oh, well, people value it outside the company. I mean, I'll try throwing on a couple hundred friends and family. And I kind of expected this whole like unsubscribe. What the hell is this? Take me off it. And I got the same positive response. People started sharing in their organizations. Someone wrote an article on Inc. that this is the only newsletter I read. And I opened up the subscriptions, and I'd look up a couple years later, and there's 100,000 people across 60 countries reading this Friday Forward. So it's just well beyond everything I could have imagined.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I write notes when I read things sometimes, and that's one of the notes I took down for my start doing list. Is I definitely want to start sharing in baby steps. A weekly thing. But I have to ask you one question, because this is something I'm terrible at with your morning routine. Do you really not check technology for the first hour in your morning?
I really try. I've gone through some stuff in the last month where we've been working on a deal where it was just kind of crazy 24 hours a day. But yeah, I really do try. I do definitely do the shutdown. I do not leave. Put my phone in downstairs after dinner in the kitchen and leave it downstairs. And I really try to get into my morning routine before I have, looked at anything. I definitely don't open my email. I might read an article or two, but I don't I know, look, we're not in the medical field. I'm not saving anyone's life, but I know myself, and I know some of my worst night's sleep I've ever had are an email I looked at 10 o'clock that isn't the end of the world, but then it's like, I'm solving the problem. I'm writing the email back in my dreams. Like, so I try to turn off that stuff, the stuff that's really going to distract me.
Funny you say that. 11:30 last night, I had the exact same thing. I had a text come through, and I'm like, I really wish I hadn't read that one until the morning. So
every time, right? It's nothing you can do at that time. If you're not in a doctor, you're not saving anyone's life. But once you look, when you run your own business, and once you see it, and it's really just hard to clear that from your mind at 10 or 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, exactly. I get to move on and let's talk about leadership. You talked about different leadership organizations over the years that you've been a part of. I've heard you say in previous interviews that Herb Kelleher, the former CEO of Southwest Airlines, is your favorite all-time CEO. And those interviews were a little while ago. So I'm curious now, as we get to the end of 2020, who do you admire now as leaders? Like, who do you think's risen as a leader in 2020, or is Herb still the guy?
It'd be interesting. Because it is interesting. I don't know. I'm having a really hard time picking positive leaders in 2020. I actually think that it's a lot of unheralded people that no one will have ever heard of, because I think, at multiple levels, our public leaders have struggled and have gotten tied up. I think politics and leadership have gotten so intertwined, where people are having a hard time leading because they're so worried about the politics of stuff. But there are things that I just, respect about Herb in terms of both leading that company with a culture. Southwest is actually having discussions about potentially having the first layoffs ever as an organization. I think what's interesting is he has been gone from running that organization for a long time, but the culture and everything he did really still exists to this day. But yeah, just to me, someone who can go into an industry where everyone else is losing money, failing, following the same strategy, and have a totally counter approach and make more money than the entire industry, clearly shows that it is leadership. It's not right time, right place, right? It's not oh, I invented the vaccine when people needed the vaccine, or the car. The airline business was the airline business. So it was really easy to, and you would say that being a low cost carrier in a business that's destroyed more wealth than, just the worst possible value proposition. So, they did all of it by just being really true to what they wanted to do, not doing everything. And I just think there's not a lot of businesses that are willing to just put their stake in the ground and go for it. And yeah, sadly, I'm having a hard time. Again, a lot of the people I've been really impressed with what they've done this year are names that no one would, know of.
Yeah, gone are the days of the charismatic, out there leader. And it's really, you're absolutely right, especially as it comes to those unsung heroes that are so focused on doing a good job right now, not telling everyone what a good job they're doing. So yeah, I would love to pick up
the YPO, someone just joined YPO, a friend of mine. His company has made it through. They have spent so much time donating their resources. They're giving 25% of their profits this year. He's I just don't feel doing well while other people are struggling. That is, that's what I look at as someone who's really a strong leader.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think a year from now, we have to pick up that conversation and we'll really be able to see sort of who was able to rise through the challenge. Let's dig in further to 2020 and some of the lessons. Me being in the HR field, I love talking about workplace. And that's probably where, other than sort of the health implications of 2020, we've seen radical change and a complete 180 pivot. So some of the themes that come to mind for me as we end this year are things like remote work, cancel culture, social justice issues, the importance of mental and physical health and how that ties to the workplace. When you think about 2020, what are the things that come to mind for you? And what lessons are you going to take away from that?
Yeah, there's so many ways to answer that question. Two of the biggest themes that we're seeing, and for us, this is a little different, is the transition to remote work, very clearly for a lot of organizations. We've always been remote. So we had that sort of in our favor. However, this ties to issue number two. because we've always been flexible, a lot of the people who chose our environment were people with young kids who I think have been just disproportionately impacted in terms of this. And so that's, that goes into this thing with the word mental health. I mean, is the discussion I'm having with every other CEO, every other HR person about just how much people are struggling within their organizations. And they're not, normally if people were stressed or we were going through a time, I could do an assessment and say, oh, here's the problem. We're onboarding too many clients. The end of month reports are too much. Our staffing ratios are off and we can fix the problem. But the stress is like coming from the outside. And the way I describe it is if people normally hit their stress index at 75, in an organization, I think recently they're hitting it at like 25. And so this is a new challenge for leaders because it is not about what you can fix in the workplace. It's trying to understand what's going on with them, how you can help them, as best you can kind of manage what they have to manage out of work. And it's a delicate balance, right? Because for the businesses that are fortunate enough to be busy, you don't want to put those client relationships at risk or stuff and where then you would have a business problem and then you'd create more struggle, but people are struggling. They're stressed. They've got 3 kids homeschooling. They've got, a spouse who's a first responder out and then coming back into the house. And so we really had to, spend a lot of time and just constant conversations, about this in terms of finding out where people are, what they need, how we can help, and understand we can't solve all the problems, but we want to know about them.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And we've actually found in our business, we're doing 10x the amount of workplace investigations we would have done in previous years. And it's because people have a short fuse or they're acting out. And one of the important challenges that we have to get employers' heads around is people are behaving, I use the word badly because they're mad and they're sad and they're frustrated and they're scared. But you've got to be kind as an employer too. You need to look at this with potentially a different lens than you did in 2019 or before, with some empathy and some kindness as well, because you're absolutely right. It takes people will lose their temper at 25% instead of maybe 90% a year from now. And so you have to juggle that.
And we're in client services, right? So one of the things I think a lot of people in client services seen is, and again, it's changing their mindset around, hey, the clients are really, so when you're angry, it's much easier to yell at a vendor, than an employee. And so we've worked with our team on, look, that person may be really struggling. Like that may look like they're yelling or whatever today, but, we looked at the stats. It was like 60% of the people have mental health, 32% are depressed, and 11% have contemplated suicide in the last 6 months. So we want to seem like, assume that this person who's just showing up as angry today has one of these issues. Like, how can you show up for them? How can you connect to them as a person? Like, again, it's just show a little bit of grace because you don't know what the other person is doing. And there's an interesting angle on this too, which is we've also, said like, don't crush the caregivers or the HR, your boss, like that may be the person who's struggling. Like everyone needs to sort of have empathy, upwards, downwards, sideways. We were like, look, don't abuse the first responder. Our culture team is out there trying to do 10x the discussions and all this stuff. And, people are angry and mad. I'm like, but remember, they're in the same situation that you are. So like, you gotta give them a little bit of this person's having this conversation while their 3 kids are running around in the background. Like it's not ideal for them either.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the key words you said it there was understanding and addressing the whole person, not just what you're seeing in the workplace. So interesting times. So based on some of these challenges, do you think remote work is here to stay?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Look, we've been remote for 14 years. I have a book coming out, a new book on remote work, the full-length version of one I wrote this summer. But I'm not saying everyone's going to remote, like there's not going to be any offices anymore. But I do think like with online shopping or digital, like we've had 10 years of acceleration in a year. And I don't think we're going to go backwards on plugging that we're not going to go plug the bottle. It's already out. So I really think it's about companies understanding the opportunity, the challenge, what they want from a business, what their employees want. Look, there's some companies that are going to call people back into the office and they're not going to want to go. And then there's some companies where the people are going to want to go back in the office and they're going to say, you know what, we got rid of our offices. And then there's some that are kind of not make a decision and get stuck in between. I think every company needs a strategy and a clear strategy, and they need to communicate that and support it. And they should make the assumption that they might lose a third of their people based on that strategy because it might not be aligned with what people want. But what's worse than putting a stake in the ground and sort of reshuffling is trying to tell everyone what they want to hear and not really having a strategy. I really worry about hybrid. I think that hybrid can work if it is a strategy. If hybrid is the absence of a decision, and you just say, well, figure it out.
You're going
to have all this weird subculture thing where people realize that, the people who come in for Debbie's Wednesday meeting are getting promoted and the people who do it from home are out of the loop. And you're going to have a lot of unintended consequences, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And when we look at the data, it's really split. About half of the people want to come back into work, half want to work remotely. And I was talking to a CEO yesterday. They have a workforce, I think, give or take about 400 people. And they send out the survey, and sure enough, half want to come back, half don't. Yeah. So they opened the office for the half that do, and one person showed up. So sometimes what people think they want isn't necessarily what they want. So I think you're right. You need to be intentional, and you have to have a strategy around it.
Yeah, I mean, I do think offices will not be sized for 100% going forward. I think they'll be sized for 50 or 60 or, in different ways. Dropbox is actually doing all their offices sort of as meeting places, studio, like just really for the things that you want to get together to do. But I heard a CEO tell me that like this is the type of stuff that people have to think about. So they're sort of hybrid, but when they do Zoom calls or meetings, people in the office will go into cubbies and join the call rather than have this notion of there are people in a conference room and people missing it out. So this sort of how do we put people on a playing field? Because when I did the interviews for my book, the number one word that people use surprisingly consistently was how it was a very democratizing event for their organization. It put all, locations on the same page, all people on the same screen. It wasn't now you were at the headquarters or the non-headquarters. And so
head of the table. Yeah.
Yeah. How do we keep that sort of democratization of the organization?
Yeah, no, it's a fascinating thing. And I don't think anyone's got the magic bullet yet. And I think the important thing is figuring out how your culture connects and how you do that. And some people do it well online. Some people you need to do 1 day a week in the office. So time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, there's some rabid extroverts who it's just not it's torture to them. Every day is like being in jail, right? So that person needs to align with what your organization is offering.
Yeah, 100%. Which brings me to my next question, which is perfect. Now that it's December, let's look forward. What are you excited about for 2021?
Yeah, I've been increasingly. Look, I think a lot of businesses have had to do some hard work. One of my friends in a forum told me that they did 5 years of digitization of their business in 3 months that they should have done before that. And so I think a lot of people have retooled, made tough changes, figured out how to sort of survive in a less than optimal market. And I am not generally a bubbly. I'm a pragmatic optimist. I'm never the strong buy guy, but I'm getting more signals that Q3 and 4 next year are going to look like the roaring 20s. Like I think people are going to be out spending, traveling. It's going to be a pretty big snapback. But I think businesses have to have all of this stuff sorted out, like their office, their playbook, their hiring strategy, and be ready for it. But it's been a long year, so I'm excited just for a little bit of a more normal environment. And even now, our leadership team was joking about there's a call we had between Christmas and New Year's, our weekly call, and someone said, well, we're on vacation, we're not going to do it. And everyone's like, well, we got some stuff going on January 1st, and none of us are going to be anywhere, so we can do it. So I think people, in order to also perform highly at work, you need a break. And right now, a break is like being in your office. It's your house. It's not, you can't go anywhere. So I do think I think morale will improve a lot as these vaccines get out and we start to get back to some sort of normal. But I do think businesses should be prepared for a pretty crazy period in the second half of 2021.
Yeah, I agree. And turnover too. I think a lot of people over this year have reflected about what they truly want to do. Are they happy in their role? Are they going to get where they need to go to? And so I think there's going to be more attrition than we typically see in the workplace. And I think people need to be prepared for that. It's not going to be people are staying put because they have a job. It's people are now going to want to go where they're happy.
I agree with you 100%. But there's another factor where I think attrition's higher. I also think people are just associating this time period with their job. And some people, unfortunately, I think they're going to leave some good companies for bad ones or elsewise, like where they just feel like I need to change. Like all I remember from this year was working home, but that may not solve the problem. But we've already seen that in our company. I think people are just associating the time with our organization, and they just want a change. And I agree. I think turnover is going to be pretty high. But I always say, look, the opportunity is in the threat. And at the same time, we've been doing remote for 10 plus years. We know how to do it, win these culture awards. Like the people that we have coming in that want to change from the other company have been pretty extraordinary. Like we've seen our best talent coming in. So if we're going to lose a lot, it's a great chance to really like retool with like our type of people.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I hadn't actually thought about it's almost like PTSD. You're right.
Yeah.
You want to get away from what associates you with negative experiences. So that's fascinating. I'm going to take that away from today. Before I go back to my questions, we have one from Twitter from Carrie, and she wants to know, what are some of the strategies you've implemented to alleviate the stress of employees? How do you practice empathy day to day?
It's just there's nothing we can do to take away 2/3 of their work, which is what people probably need now, and if in diminished capacity. I think it's a lot of conversations. It's mindset. We've had some speakers come in and provide tools, around thinking about gratitude and the aspects of your life and sort of reframing. I think people stepping in and helping each other. Like there is no magic pill for a lot of these things. So it really is a lot of conversations, understanding, connection, empathy. Like, and we talked about, look, this next 8 weeks is going to be really rough. But hopefully there's a light, at the end of the tunnel. It's literally going to be dark and physically going to, be dark. So there is no, I think everyone, unfortunately in our sort of hack world, we're looking for the magic bullet. And again, I look at client service, and if people have 50% emotionally to give, I can't have them do 50% of the work, or we will be out of business, right? So we're trying to find out the breaks that people need. People are covering each other. Like I think you actually need to get people to really feel like they're part of a team. They're moving in the same direction. People have their back. And I think people, if they don't feel like they're doing it themselves, then they can kind of collectively carry more weight.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I like a couple of things you said in there. Honesty. So being realistic. Yes, this absolutely sucks. And we're all going through challenges. Transparency. I think that's important. And empathy. I mean, I think those three things are so key. And you said something that I actually heard on a podcast, and I'd experienced the same thing. When people are at home, no one wants to waste their vacation time. And so I think one of the things that's really important, and I was listening to sort of your view on this as well, is we still need to make sure that people are taking time off. And people are hesitant to do that because they can't go on a beach vacation or a ski vacation. How do you encourage people to think about getting their employees to take some time off, especially because we have the holidays coming up?
Yeah, the nice thing for our business is pretty quiet over that week, and I think for a lot of businesses. But we started mandating time off over the summer, like saying, look, we can't have everyone save up all their vacation, because if everyone will want to go away at the same time. But we also think that that's not the right strategy. So I think we actually got up to people had to take off 2 days a month, like really encouraging them just to, even if you had nowhere to go. And it's harder now. Again, in the summer, you could have gone for a walk, you could get outside, like it's going to be harder, but just shut down for a day, hang out with your family, play board games. I do think it's really important. Like we've seen people come back much more refreshed and relaxed. But look, that's going to be a really interesting thing that everyone's going to have to, you can't have 100% of your company go on vacation in Q3. It's just not going to work. So companies are going to have to figure out how to help each other, how to fill in. What people have really learned, because look, we all have another level that we don't have. So even if you're like, look, I am maxed and I can't do any more, and then you find out your colleague's parent suddenly died of COVID, somehow you find it how to take on their work for a day or two. Like it becomes sort of a higher purpose. And I think that healthy teams will be able to figure out how to do that for each other. I think unhealthy teams and organizations, everyone's going to be like, looking out for themselves, and that could be really problematic.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And putting on my governance compliance hat, you've got to remind employers too that the obligation for people to take time off is on the employer, not the employee. So as a good employer, we need to make sure that we're getting that people their time off that they need, not just for the nice reasons, but also for we actually have to do this as an employer. I want to shift to something a little bit happier. As we look to 2021, people are starting to talk about their New Year's resolutions. And I think we also know, I mean, most people do something as a New Year's resolution in January, but we also know by January 17th, about 70% of people have given up on it already. Do you have any recommendations for people to make the resolution stick?
Yeah, the first is don't make resolutions.
I agree.
There's a lot of data, and Dan Pink talked about this in his book When. There is a lot of data that beginnings are good points of momentum, like beginnings of week, months, year are points where we pay attention to momentum. I believe that at any point you should sit down and do the long-term work of your goals and your plan, your values, and what you want. What I consider January, just like a company, like the company doesn't wake up and say, like, what business do I want to be in, whatever. The company then says, look, here's our goals and our vision. What do we want to do this year that aligns with that? I think people should look at these times of recalibration and not resolutions. Like, to me, it's a great time to be like, I make my list of the stuff. We think kind of in years and quarters, and then I sit down and I'm like, okay, what is most important that I do this year? But it is all part of the long-term plan. It is not part of this grand revisioning of something, ridiculous. And it's more important that I commit to that over every quarter and the whole year than it is what I'm going to do in January. We won't be able to see the gym effect this year, but as you said, I remember you can't get in the gym on January 2nd and January 21st or 17th, and the gyms, all the cars are gone. So I think the shorter term you set these resolutions, the better. If you were to say something like, I want to get healthier this year, and I'm committing to a 5K in October, or I'm committing to, 20 minutes of exercise, 4 hours a day a week, and this is sort of my those are much more likely to happen than for you to make some grand thing that you're going to change in your life. If you don't put accountability into it, if you don't put a timeline into it, if you don't put all of these other support functions, it won't happen.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I learned something else from you that I think would be really great to share with the audience. You did a unique exercise in one of your retreats called the last talk. So as we talk about focusing and figuring out what's important for you before you set your goals, can you share what you did there?
Yeah. So we had these employee TED Talks going for a couple of years, and some people got up and just shared a story or something personal or otherwise. And since we're virtual, we do this big in-person event, and we try to make it pretty deep and pretty meaningful from a team building standpoint. And I got to know a gentleman named Philip McKernan, who leads this initiative called One Last Talk. And One Last Talk is kind of what it sounds like. If I was leaving the world tomorrow, what is the speech that I need to give or haven't given? And Philip's one of these coach people who does not let you off the hook. If you come in with the 3 tips to a happy life, he will tell you that's not your speech if you're dying tomorrow. That is not your story. That's not the thing you had to tell. And he gets people down to what's the story. And so we took sort of a risk. We said, look, we're going to bring in Philip. We have 4 slots. If people want to get up and give one of these one last talks, we gave them the book so they can understand what it was. These are deeply personal stories, right? Imagine in the book about people who have not ever shared abuse stories or things that, really defined who they were and how they trusted people their whole life and otherwise. And so we had 8 people volunteer. I thought we'd have 0. We kind of got it down to 4. Philip worked with those people for about a month. They got up on stage and delivered 4 of these one last talks, sharing things that people had no idea, deeply personal. But it described a lot about who they were, how they show up at work, core to them. And not only was there really not a dry eye in the room, I think, by the time the 4th were done, but it was almost this genie we couldn't put back in the bottle. Over the next 24 hours, people were sharing at a depth and level and a personal level. People they worked with for 5 years, reeling like, Debbie, I have never asked you about your family or anything. And it was incredible, the depth of sharing. And it just, it showed, everyone's got a story to tell. Everyone has something that's important to them, but also, sort of demonstrating vulnerability. And I think people want to be more vulnerable and more real in the work environment. They're just not given the opportunity. So look, it was a risk reward type thing. I think, again, a day or 2 in that, we're like, all right, everyone, we need to, we gotta kind of bottle this back in. But it was incredibly impactful for the team.
Yeah, I can't think of a better way to build trust within a team. And I think we all know that building trust is a foundation of an effective and a healthy team, for sure. I'm going to ask you one last, actually, no, I want to do the speed round first. I love speed rounds. I do want to do a speed round before we run out of time. Yeah. So I've got a couple quick ones here for you. Most important leadership trait?
I think authenticity. And I particularly in a global organization, I think integrity a lot of times has cultural elements and different meanings. I just think you do what you say, what you think, like they're all aligned. That's I think is the most important thing.
Authenticity. Good one. Primary weakness of poor leaders?
I think overconfidence.
Good one. Cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Best workplace perk?
Flexibility.
Ski or beach vacation?
Ski. That is a marital debate that I have in my house.
Me too. I know
beach,
that
for sure.
We got Maui and we got Whistler, so we go exactly.
That's a good week. Yeah.
Yeah. Any given day. A favorite book?
Atlas Shrugged.
Oh, interesting. Your pandemic lockdown Netflix binge?
We've had a couple. We've been rewatching How I Met Your Mother with my kids and the family, and they find it very funny.
Good one. I haven't done that one with my kids. If 2021 were to have a theme, what would it be?
It's got to be better.
Got to be better. You can't beat that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go back to my final two questions for you because I don't have any on my feed right now. The first one is, one of the things you frequently mention is ideas and best practices that you learn from other people. How much of your success, because you've had a lot of success at a young age, is due to remarkable, unique, inventive ideas, and how much is from experience share and learning from other people?
Oh, I'd say a lot of it is luck. A ton of it is learning from other people. We just went through an investment process, and I think everything I got was setting up 50 calls with other YPO members and people who've done similar stuff and getting all their experiences, ideas. Look, yes, you need ideas. It's probably a quarter. But then to make an idea happen, you need to find the person, the market, the place, whatever. And that is really where, the network and the best practices and the experience and everything come into play. So every it's been interesting. Every forum meeting that's been had during the pandemic, people seem to be like, really over sharing their appreciation for having that in their life. I think they're really reflecting on that.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, there's nothing more than better than having those peer forums. I actually heard an interesting interview with one of the execs at Whole Foods, and they even said when they look at R&D, they actually call it research and duplicate.
Yeah.
So you look at some of these primary
I've heard rip off and duplicate.
Me too. Yeah. I was going to say for one, research and duplicate, but rip off and duplicate too. So it really is sometimes about execution and not just trying to find the craziest ideas that are out there.
Yeah.
So let's go to my last question. We ask this one of all global leaders, so this is not just for you. What advice would you give your fellow global leaders, especially the younger generation, and in particular those of a marketing bent?
It's funny. This has come up in a couple different ways, but I think one thing I've seen is how many incredibly successful people were mentored by other incredibly successful leaders, and I think if you're in your 20s and you're looking at opportunities, or you're looking at $1,000 versus $4,000, putting yourself in the best possible companies, organizations, leadership programs under people, like that is going to make the biggest difference on your life in 10 years. It is not going to be the $5,000 or the $10,000 you or more paid. So, you read all these things, the amount of people who've come out of the Cutco, training program and gone to build it, just the experiences that you have. I think someone I interviewed yesterday was saying similarly, like just like get in the right room. It's more important if you were should be the EA to like the most incredible person you could find, to be in those rooms, hear those conversations, learn that stuff. To me, that's I think everyone is probably, most people, aren't able to do everything they want to do in their 20s, or they're underpaid. But the position you put yourself in then, I think, makes some of the biggest difference later on.
I couldn't agree more. People always ask me that question. When I was 18, the first job I took, and now I'm going to age myself, I was making $16,500 a year. But what I did is I absolutely chose the organization that invested in people, that had great leaders, that mentored their people. And I know that paid off 10x versus taking a job that paid more. It really is about the right room, the right leadership. And I mean, you've given us so many great examples today. So thank you for that. And with that, I think we're gonna wrap this up. So thank you so much for joining us today. I could talk to you all day long. I have so many more questions. And thanks to all our friends that tuned in today. If you enjoyed this podcast, let us know by sharing it with your friends, your followers, your connections, and don't forget to follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, all those favorite places that we all use in our social media. Thank you for watching today, and hope to see you again next time.